Guys, live finger mullet. This is one of the best ways to catch redfish. Finger mullet live everywhere redfish do, and they eat them all the time. They're used to them. They've been eating them since the redfish were tiny little fry. So like, they're used to eating mullet. It is a great bait. This is a smaller finger mullet. It's a silver mullet. There's 3 ways to use this mullet: live, tail hooked, live, nose hooked, or cut. And we're going to run through that real quick. My favorite rigs to catch redfish with these live mullet. But you can also interchange these techniques that I'm going to talk about with pogies, menhaden, mud minnows, pinfish, any other smaller bait fish about this size. You can do the same thing too. But I'd say the king for catching redfish is these mullet. When a redfish sees this, its instinct is to eat it. It's great bait. So live tail hooked. Use a 30-pound leader, fluorocarbon leader. On a mullet this size, I've got a 4/0 circle hook. You can hook it right in the tail right here. This technique is great for free lining out over a flat. If you're trying to fish and back up underneath some docks, if you're doing some sight fishing, really anywhere the water is, I'd say, shallower than 3 feet, this is a fantastic way to get your bait to cover a lot of water and swim out away from you. It also holds the mullet back. So redfish are kind of a slow moving fish, and their mouth is on the bottom, so they have a hard time getting up to eat a live mullet. So oftentimes if it's tail hooked, you can put some pressure on that mullet and it's going to keep him from swimming too fast. He's just going to sit in one spot. So you can hold him in place, and that redfish might take 2 or 3 swipes at him before he gets him, but he'll eventually get him if you hold back on that mullet. So I like fishing shallow water, tail hooking these baits. If I'm going to be sight fishing these redfish, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just nose hook them just like this. I can drag it next to my boat, or if I'm wade fishing, and I can pitch this mullet. It does really well, lasts a long time, and as you're dragging them before you cast, even if it's for like 10 minutes, it's getting oxygen over its gills, and it'll stay alive and feisty for a long period of time if you nose hook them like that. And while we're still talking about live mullet, now I don't ever recommend using a mullet this size unless it's cut. So a lot of times people use mullet this size that's dead, they'll buy at a bait shop. That's not effective. If you do, you want to cut them. So we're talking about live mullet here. If you're going to be sight fishing and pitching under mangroves and docks, you got a 1/8 ounce jig head. You can use heavier if you're in deeper water, heavy current. Nose hook this bait just like that. And you can drag it alongside between your casts. You can cast and retrieve it, cast and retrieve it. If you're just walking out on your dock in the morning and you're going to look and see if there's some redfish around, this is a really good way to be ready to go to pitch to those redfish. Also, if you're working a mangrove shoreline, you can skip it way up under the mangroves with that live mullet, and it forces the mullet down on the bottom, which is the redfish's natural comfort zone. They're feeding down on the bottom. Redfish primarily eat crustaceans or little bait fish on the bottom. So when he sees this bait on the bottom, he's going to jump all over it. And one more way here is the knocker rig. If you're fishing in heavier current, and you want your bait down on the bottom. So if you're in deeper water or heavy current, you're not going to catch redfish up on the surface. They're going to be bottom feeders. Redfish are bottom feeders for the most part. So here's a knocker rig. This is if I was fishing in an open flat without much structure, I've got about 6 feet of 20-pound fluorocarbon in my braid, weight, and then you've got my swivel. And then I've got about 12 inches of 20-pound fluorocarbon leader. And to match the hatch, I've got a 4/0 circle hook, live mullet, and I'm going to hook them in the nose. So this is heavy current, and I want my bait down on the bottom. So deep water, heavy current, this is what I would use. Let me share with you one of my favorite rigs for catching redfish. If you know where those redfish are going to swim, whether it's down a redfish highway, it's going along some mangroves, if you're fishing in shallower water and you want your bait to stay in one place with a live mullet and there's not too much current, this is the rig for you. This is my favorite redfish rig if I need to catch redfish and I know where they are. And there's a lot of situations like that. For one is you pull up on a mangrove shoreline, you know the redfish are swimming right along the mangrove roots, and you want your bait to sit right where those redfish are going to be traveling. This is the rig. And let me show you why. It is just a typical knocker rig. This one here is a 20-pound I've got a 1 ounce egg sinker, which is about the perfect weight for fishing a live mullet, and I've got 20-pound fluorocarbon leader and a swivel. My leader's 12 inches long, and I've got a 4/0 circle hook. Now, if you're fishing along mangroves, I'd probably beef this up to a 30-pound to 30-pound. This would be great for fishing open flats, but this is the rig. Now, let me show you how I rig it and how it works. Live finger mullet, hook them on the downside close to the tail, just like that. Now what happens is you cast your bait out where you want it, and you put it in that spot, and it's going to stay there. You keep your line kind of tight, going back to the boat or waiting or however you're fishing, or from your dock, and this bait is going to sit there and fight against that weight, and he's going to swim like this. And it's going to sit there and do that, and it won't rest. And eventually that redfish is going to creep along and eat it. Now, if it's back in the mangroves or back in the dock, all of that flashing over a period of time, it's going to draw the fish out of the structure to eat this bait. Now, redfish aren't that fast moving, especially in the wintertime. And so holding that mullet tight with a weight guarantees that redfish can catch your mullet. It's not going to swim away. So freelining your bait, you throw it up there along the mangroves, your mullet swims out. You throw it where you want it, it swims away. This holds it right in place. It's also a great rig if you're using multiple rods. You don't want to use this rig if you're fishing in deep water or if there's a lot of current, because that mullet's going to get tangled up in your line, or it's going to start to spin. If there's a lot of current, it's going to spin after a while. That's why you want to hook them in the nose in heavy current. So shallower water, I'd say maybe 8 feet or less, not too much current, and you know where those redfish are swimming, this is a magical rig. So guys, that's really all you need to know about finger mullet and redfish. They love them, and tight lines.